Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Support comes from the University of Alaska College Savings Plan, helping you and your child save for college every step of the way, from diapers to diploma. More information at uacollegesavings.com.
The National Weather Service.
Good Wednesday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with you on this 10th of February. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information on weather.gov/Alaska. Or you can localize your weather information by going to weather.gov/Fairbanks for the interior, the west coast, and the north coast, as well as southwestern Alaska and south central and the Aleutians can easily see your localized weather at weather.gov/Anchorage. And of course, for the panhandle from Prince William Sound eastward, you can get your weather information from weather.gov/Juneau. Lots of different ways to get your weather forecast and safety information anytime. You can also give us a call on the weather info line at 800-472-0391. Find us on Facebook at NWS Alaska, on Twitter using the same, and of course the hashtag AKwx, and on YouTube. And this is going to be important tomorrow. If you haven't checked out the YouTube broadcast in a while, make sure you do that. NWS Anchorage is a great place to start on YouTube. You can search for that address, or if you want to find the entire broadcast of what you're seeing here, look for AKwx TV. Simply search for that on YouTube and you'll get the entire Alaska Weather Show. And the reason why I say that tonight is that tomorrow this Alaska Weather Show will be preempted by the PBS NewsHour's Democratic debate, and so there will be no live viewing of Alaska weather tomorrow as you normally see it. However, if you watch 360 North, your normal broadcast should occur, and you will be able to find this entire broadcast on Alaska Weather on YouTube. So again, look for AKwx TV, find us on YouTube, find us on 360 North, and you will rejoin us, of course, hopefully, as we get into Friday's regular occurrence of Alaska weather. Now, on with today's weather. Here we go. Satellite picture shows the continued pattern we've been watching for weeks now, it looks like. However, there are some hints about a week and a half from now, maybe 2 weeks out, that things could change just a little bit, but that's also 10 days to about 14 days out ahead in time, where a lot of things can change between now and then. You know how that works. Well, low pressure is working up the eastern Gulf, and we continue to see waves raking over southeastern Alaska, working into the north and western parts of the Gulf, and then finally making their way into the Bering Sea. The overall pattern is still the same. Very dry conditions continue for the interior. Waves of wind and light snow and blowing snow are working across the north slope and the Arctic coast there. That remains unchanged. And each one of these impulses as it moves out of the Yukon is pretty dry. So we get clouds working their way in across the Alcan border and into the interior. And quite honestly, this is really reminiscent of more of a summer-like pattern where we have these waves working up through the Gulf and occasionally these impulses working their way out across the Yukon and into the interior. Now, if we were in a summer pattern, we would have enough daytime heating, of course, to promote a lot more development of cloud cover and convection and showers and thunderstorms. That's not the case. Things are cold, they're locked down, they're stable, they don't want to bubble up and turn into more active weather. So instead, in this case, we just have southeast getting wet, the north and west seeing clouds moving through with occasional daytime of sunshine there and drier conditions, and then the leftovers working over southwestern Alaska, and rain mixed with snow occasionally working through the central and western chain. This pattern, though, is conducive to more ice development there. Just last week, we were talking about some extensive polynyas right across the western and northwestern coastlines. Of course, a polynya is an area of more open water surrounded by ice. It's kind of like a puddle of water surrounded by the ice sheet as it's been working its way through the western coast, and the wind was doing that. The wind was opening up the water. Well, now a lot of that's filled back in, and the ice is advancing more to the south and west, and that trend should continue. And again, those polynyas have filled in for many locations. Here's a look at the surface chart, and look at this. Big surprise, low pressure wave here. Another one out across the western part of the Gulf, the extreme western areas just south of the Alaska Peninsula, and each one of these waves is already dying out. But you can see that we're going to get another wave of wind working up through southern and sections of southeast, and the entire panhandle already dealing with the most recent remnant of that. Waves of low pressure working from east to west across the North Slope. Very dry conditions there. Not much of a temperature change anywhere, so we're not drawing any fronts, but we've got pockets of light snow and blowing snow and probably some icing from time to time. If you're trying to fly around on the North Slope, conditions are available for light to at least moderate icing there from time to time in the last 24 hours. We expect that to continue as we head through tonight. Look for patchy fog, light snow, and blowing snow for sure as we go through tonight. Low pressure will be south of Kodiak Island, around 983 millibars. The front dying out as it reaches the Gulf Coast. Look for light rain possibly across southeast. Snow showers up across some of the higher terrain as low as about 400 feet for areas around Haines and Skagway, a little bit higher up there for you. Rain and snow showers for Lake Iliamna and points west into Bristol Bay, and just hit and miss rain and snow showers for the chain. You'll see some snow shower opportunities around St. Lawrence Island and Savunga, all the way down towards St. Matthew. But look, a lot of dry air across the Yukon Valley and northward again. More wind and clouds than anything else. As we get into Thursday, the current wave of low pressure resets and merges south of Kodiak Island. We'll see a little more wind working into Prince William Sound and along the Shelikof Strait region and through Gore Point and the Cook Inlet region. The clouds will bank up against the Alaska Range. Watch for some snow showers there, and a few of those might make it over. For southeast, especially from Port Alexander southward toward the Dixon entrance, you might catch a little bit of a break in the precipitation. The winds will still be with you, and you'll still see some rain and snow on the further northern end. But another wave is headed your way. Low pressure at 984 millibars is working out of the Pacific Northwest and headed back into southeastern Alaska. Snow showers may work their way over the Tanana Valley and the middle Yukon Valley. The pressure gradient is still fairly tight up across the Beaufort Seacoast, and as that's working from east to west, watch for the winds to really come up, especially at 3,000 and 9,000 feet up. The winds are cranking around 50 to 60 knots in some cases there, so no doubt it's going to be blustery down at the surface, and that could cause some poor visibility from time to time. So keep your eye on the changing weather if you're trying to move around across the North Slope tomorrow. Out across the North Pacific, a 976 millibar low is trying to work its way up toward the Aleutians. It's going to have a hard time doing this because the flow is pretty much from east to west here. So this may just kind of nudge up a little bit further north and then drop back down and across the Gulf. As we get into Friday, you can see it never made it into the Bering at all. Look for pockets of rainfall there across the central chain. You'll have more of an east and northeasterly flow working into the low, and as that moves further eastward, the winds will flip around to the north and northwest. Low pressure in the central Gulf at 982 millibars, and what do you know, the front's right up against the Gulf Coast once again. The winds will tighten up on the eastern side. You'll probably have a pretty strong wind coming in from the south across the outer coast. The inner coast may be sheltered from that just a little bit depending on where the front sets up. Look for rain and snow showers along that frontal boundary. A better chance of rain and snow for Kodiak Island. A little bit of wind for Cook Inlet, probably the Copper River Basin. The interior stays mainly dry, but what's this? Well, we got a little bit of a colder air pool trying to settle up out across the middle Yukon Valley. It's not making a whole lot of progress eastward. It just can't, but the air certainly to the east is just enough on the warm side that decided to draw in a little front for you there. And if that does happen, there's a better chance of seeing at least a few snow showers there. The wind stays up across the North Slope and the Arctic coast with pockets of fog and probably some icing potential as well as areas of blowing snow. That means poor visibility and again, that icing potential for aviators too. Your forecast, well, we always like to look at what happened today first. So look for 40s and 50s for most of southeast today. Around 3 o'clock it was 52 in Sitka, upper 40s for Metlakatla, Craig, and Klawock, a little bit cooler than yesterday. Upper 30s to about 40 around the Haines and Skagway regions and the capital city. Around Prince William Sound, only 34 in Valdez today, but 10 degrees warmer or more around Cordova today at 47, 35 in Kenai, 34 in Anchorage, and it was about 25 for Talkeetna. 12 in Fairbanks, 3 in Eagle today, 2 for Northway, and 0 in Fort Yukon. And you'll notice the temperatures a little bit further north, up around the Arctic coast. We're anywhere from 5 to about 10 below. And so dry that I'm going to have to snag a drink here. Sorry, it's one of those things this time of the year. There you go. I feel like a Cub weather reporter there for you. 5 above in Kivalina, 1 above in Kotzebue today. And it was 7 above in Shishmaref with 26 above for Nome. So considerably warmer the further south you go. Into Norton Sound, temps are in the teens and 20s, 4 above for Galena. And for Tanana and places northward, only single digits were reported. As you get into McGrath and the Kuskokwim Valley, teens and 20s there. Down toward Grayling, it was 19 on the Yukon, 16 in Bethel. For Bristol Bay temps, you see 30s and 40s for most areas. Lake Iliamna was fairly warm today. As you get into the Alaska Peninsula, 30s and 40s all the way down the coastline. Sand Point was about 43, Cold Bay and Falls Pass about 37, 38 for Dutch Harbor and Unalaska, and the Pribilofs were in the mid-30s, even above freezing though. Closer to 40 for Atka with 37 in Adak. Now overnight low temperatures will stay below freezing for most of South Central, 39 in Kodiak tonight, 30s and 40s for Southeast, and look for temps around freezing for the Central Chain, 13 in Nunivak Island, 6 in Nome, and for Barrow look for 13 below, with Fairbanks again at 10, a high of 19 tomorrow, 30s and 40s for South Central, a milder day expected. Look for mid to upper 40s, even 50-degree readings possible for southern parts of Southeast as another surge of that warm air comes your way. 30s and 40s for a good chunk of the chain, and 17 in Nunivak Island, with Bethel looking at 15 and 16 in Nome for your Thursday. Let's take a look at what's going on for flying weather. IFR conditions expected for areas around Barrow to Atkasuk and eastward toward Kaktovik. Watch for pockets of IFR around Shelikof Strait and the eastern side of Kodiak Island, likely to include Kodiak. And MVFR conditions for the Lynn Canal all the way down toward Point Alexander, including Sitka and northward to just about Yakutat. And MVFR conditions flirting for a good chunk of the Aleutians and at times across the central and western interior. On to flying weather, Anaktuvik Pass shows VFR conditions changing to MVFR for Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass throughout the day. Look for Lake Clark and Merrill Pass to hold around MVFR through most of the day. Rainy Pass, we expect to see a decent start, but lowered ceilings and visibility as we go. Windy Pass, marginal conditions through most of your Thursday. Isabel Pass, expect that to be marginal through most of the day. Mentasta Pass should also be marginal throughout your Thursday. Tanita Pass, marginal conditions there. Portage Pass, it looks like the eastern side should be socked in through most of the day. Watch for IFR and hope for better conditions there. As Chilkoot and White Pass check in, we'll see marginal conditions there through most of Thursday. Now, freezing levels show that warmer air has gathered up west of St. Matthew and the Pribilofs, but you also have some pockets of higher level warmer air gathering there. We do expect to see some areas of icing potential along the Alaska Range, out across the central Aleutians, and certainly around southeast. Most of this will be about 4,000 to 5,000 feet and above, though, because remember, this air is warm. It's also wet, but you'll have to climb a little bit higher to find that at least isolated to maybe even moderate occasional icing risk tomorrow. Here's a look at the jet stream. Southeasterlies are picking up from 50 to 80 knots across the eastern Gulf. Several waves of low pressure there. This is the main superhighway of weather. Wind speeds around 120 to 185 knots, but we also have a guiding force that's taking a lot of that really cold air up and away from Alaska and dropping it onto the East Coast friends there in the lower 48, and they could have it. 9,000 feet, southeasterly flow coming in across south central, and with that becoming more southerly with time, 20 to 40 knots there. Look for more of a north and northeasterly flow coming off the west coast at 20 knots and a weak southerly flow across the Aleutians there. Look at those strong winds north of Point Barrow as well. 50 knots there, a little bit closer to the coast at 3,000 feet. Just racing through, and any time that air connects down to the ground, it could be fairly blustery there, so watch yourself. Look for south and easterly winds across the Panhandle. A lighter wind moving across the Barren Islands and into southwestern Alaska. Those wind speeds around 10 to 15 knots. And again, slower speeds seen there across the central and eastern chain as well as the Alaska Peninsula. The overall flow, though, again, is not one that brings a whole lot of weather to the interior or the west coast at this point. Here's turbulence below 5,000 feet. Watch for hit and miss occasional across the outer coast, especially as that frontal boundary is working its way right up against the coast. This will be for Thursday and Friday. Watch for some stronger winds to develop across the Alaska Range and northward. And below 4,000 feet, there certainly could be some gusts and low-level wind shear. Watch for some occasional moderate there across the north slope and the coastal plain, and occasional chop across the central and western chain tomorrow. That's a look at your aviation forecast. I'll be back with a look at the sea ice edge and, of course, your marine weather here in just a few minutes. Stay tuned.
Coming up on Destination Tomorrow, we take a look at NASA's Aviation Safety Program. We'll look back at some highlights of the program and find out what the future holds for aviation. All this and more next on Destination Tomorrow.
Judy, tell me a little bit more about the icing protection system. Do all planes have it?
There's what we call an anti-ice system where you don't allow the ice to grow at all. That's if you got a very hot leading edge. You see that in jets. Then there's a de-icing system which has pneumatic boots, that the boots will wrap around that leading edge, they'll inflate and pop the ice off. So you let the ice grow and then you got to get it off. The pneumatic boots are typically what you see with turboprop aircraft.
Does icing affect planes in, say, a warm climate?
Icing occurs everywhere. You've got to be aware of it. I've got a pilot friend who told me the worst icing he encountered was flying from Florida to the Caribbean in July at 16,000 feet. The worst icing he ever saw. But icing really can occur anywhere and any time. One of the things we do here at NASA is to have better designs. So maybe a system that would automatically turn on the ice protection system if a sensor goes up. The short-term solution is to train the pilots and educate them about how to detect icing, how to be aware of it, train them how to get out of the icing environment if and when they need to. Ideally, icing is a non-issue in the future. We're working to get there.
For many of us, fear is the biggest problem when it comes to flying. We thought it may be helpful to present you with some statistics that may or may not be helpful to those of you who are fearful flyers.
First, your chances of being involved in an aircraft accident are approximately 1 in 11 million, while your chances of being killed in an automobile accident are about 1 in 5,000, proving that the most dangerous part of your flight is the drive to the airport.
One last fact. Statistically, you have more of a chance of dying from the food served on board the flight than being involved in an aircraft accident.
Most people who have flown in an airplane have experienced turbulence. NASA is working on new warning systems to help pilots avoid dangerous turbulence. Paula Vaden has more.
If you've ever flown in an airplane, you are probably familiar with turbulence. Even for the most experienced flyers, the sudden, sometimes violent, irregular air motion can be an unsettling experience. In most cases, turbulence is merely an inconvenience that passengers and flight crews must endure. But in cases of severe turbulence, the violent shaking can not only cause serious injury to passengers and crew, it can also be fatal. In an effort to help aircraft avoid turbulence, researchers at NASA are testing new onboard aircraft systems. The Airborne Research Integrated Experiment System, or ARES, uses experimental systems that detect turbulence minutes before an aircraft encounters it. This new system may allow pilots to avoid severe turbulence, making flying safer. I spoke with Neil O'Connor in the Crew Systems branch at NASA Langley Research Center to find out more.
You can think of turbulence as any phenomenon in the atmosphere that's going to upset the airplane. Changes in wind that can cause the airplane to be disrupted from its normal flight. You can also get turbulence whenever you have wind rushing over the top of a mountain. The leeward side of a mountain can be very turbulent. You can also get turbulence wherever the jet stream is active. There's a high wind speed in the region of the jet stream, but slower right nearby. Thunderstorms can cause turbulence. Everyone knows right nearby the storm, but sometimes even 50 or 100 miles away in the clear air, you can get turbulence from a thunderstorm.
So Neil, how are pilots avoiding severe turbulence now?
For the most part, pilots have several simple options. They listen to the radio to hear if other pilots have already encountered turbulence in that area. So that means somebody's already been hit. They can also look at their onboard radar and try to, based on their experience, can extrapolate what they think might be, but it's not really foolproof. And they can also get a general forecast from the government sources or from their own airline.
There we got some turbulence now. We're about 3 miles short.
Though seldom damaging to modern aircraft, turbulence is the leading cause of in-flight injuries among passengers and flight crews. On average, 58 injuries aboard aircraft are reported each year. 98% of these injuries occur when unsuspecting passengers or crew are unbuckled or out of their seats when an aircraft encounters turbulence. Currently, there are no instruments on board aircraft to detect turbulence before a plane encounters it. NASA researchers hope to change this by incorporating new turbulence radar systems within existing onboard weather radars. With this new radar system in place, researchers hope to provide pilots with enough warning to either avoid the turbulent area or at least give passengers and flight attendants enough time to return to their seats and buckle up.
The radar system itself will just be a software upgrade to the existing wind shear radar that's already on board the airplanes. The beauty of that, of course, is that since it's just an upgrade to an already certified piece of hardware, it should be relatively inexpensive because you're just incrementally changing what's out there already.
So Neil, tell me how exactly this new system's going to work.
The way it'll work for the pilot is that he'll flip a switch that's labeled turbulence, and then he'll have the new software running. It'll be running mostly at cruise altitudes where pilots typically allow people to move around the cabin. It's not a problem when you're climbing or descending because everyone's already strapped in. So if you have a turbulence encounter there, it's not a big issue because everyone's already buckled in. But we want to help make a difference at altitude when you don't always know there's going to be turbulence out there. And this new product will be able to increase the capability of the system and increase the pilot's confidence in the accuracy of the system, leading to a better, safer environment.
Besides radar, is there any other kind of research with turbulence?
Doing other research, both onboard and otherwise. The onboard system is called the in situ turbulence warning system, and that's a system that uses accelerometers on the airplane to measure what the airplane feels at a given moment. That'll be transmitted automatically to all other airplanes in the general area, along with the location. And a receiving airplane will take that data and adapt it to its own size and class of airplane, and then assess whether or not it's a threat to that airplane. And if it's a threat, then it'll tell the pilot. Another way of enhancing what we have now is improving our forecast capability. And that gets into modeling of the weather and other phenomena of the atmosphere, to better understand what the potential is for turbulence.
So Neil, what are your hopes for this project?
Well, the ultimate goal, of course, is to increase the safety and reduce injuries caused by turbulence on the airplane. Right now, it's very easy to prevent injuries when you know you're going to have turbulence. The pilot says, hey, we got to buckle up for a few minutes. Everyone does it, no one gets hurt. But you don't always know the turbulence is coming. So sometimes if you don't know, people are walking around and the plane gets a lurch, someone's going to get hurt. And that happens now. So we know we can make a difference by improving the product.
That's it for this edition of NASA's Destination Tomorrow. Thanks for joining us. I'm Steele McGonigal.
And I'm Kara O'Brien. For all of us at NASA, we'll see you next time.
As we were talking about earlier, the polynyas have mostly filled in out across the west. You can see that the northeasterly flow has been pushing the ice edge further and further south and west, and it looks like right now from St. Matthew the ice edge is about 50 to 65 nautical miles away from St. Matthew, at least where the concentrations are 80% or more. So things continue to move that ice further and further south and west. On the southeast, you see northerlies coming through the Lynn Canal at 20 knots tomorrow, south and easterly flow at 25 to 30 knots further down the inner channels with 5 to 6 foot seas. A southeasterly flows predominant across the outer coast tomorrow, with seas around 17 to as high as 19 feet down toward the Dixon entrance, and easterly flow coming off of Yakutat, 35 knots with a 16-foot sea. They're up to 40 knots on Friday. Remember, the front's going to be banked up right against the outer coast. 35 to 40 knots there, 21 to 22-foot seas in the northern parts of the outer coast. The inner channels really settle down to about 15 knots or so, but where that air is really rushing in, we could see winds up to 30 knots across the Dixon entrance and Clarence Strait, with a 6-foot sea expected there on Friday. For south central northerlies coming down Cook Inlet and through Shelikof Strait at around 20 to 30 knots. Look for seas to gradually come up from 5 feet in the north all the way down to 10 feet inside of Shelikof Strait, but we're not expecting the storm force winds there as we saw today. Gales will continue tonight and continue to improve as we head into Thursday. Look for an east and southeasterly flow coming into the north and western part of the Gulf. Easterlies stay up inside of Prince William Sound at 30 knots with a 6-foot sea and diminish on Friday to a northeasterly direction. Northeasterly still in the northern Gulf at 25 to 35 knots, more of a variable flow east of Kodiak Island, and north and northeasterly winds coming down Cook Inlet, picking up a little bit there west of the Barrens, and then slowing down inside of Shelikof Strait to 15 knots with a 5-foot sea for Friday. Northeasterlies inside of Bristol Bay at 20 knots with a 4-foot sea, slightly higher seas down the coast. The Pacific coast looking at 20 to 25 knots with a 9 to 12-foot sea on Thursday. The winds become a little more southeasterly on Friday, 7 to 8-foot seas there, and light easterlies moving through Bristol Bay and down the coast with a 3 to 4-foot sea expected to wrap up the week. For the Aleutians, a north and easterly flow coming down Unalaska to AKwx, 10 to 15 knots there with a 7 to 8 foot sea, 9 to 11 foot seas for the central and eastern Aleutians on the Pacific side. Slightly faster winds out toward Kiska and Attu with a 10 foot sea there on Thursday. For Friday, northerlies still blowing at 25 knots out in the west. Look for an east to northeasterly flow for the central and eastern chain, about 20 to 15 knots at the lowest end with 7 to 8 foot seas on the Pacific side and 5 to 6 foot seas on the Bering Sea coast side. As we get toward the west, look for that northeasterly flow. This is the ice builder we were talking about with 9 foot seas out in the St. Matthew Island waters, the Kuskokwim Bay, looking at 5 foot seas on a 25 knot wind, and the Pribilovs around 20 knots with a 9 foot sea. Not a whole lot of change there for Friday. A little bit more of a northerly flow coming across St. Lawrence Island at 25 knots, about the same for St. Matthew, and 6 foot seas for St. Paul and St. George on a 20 knot wind from the north and east. For Thursday in the north, look for 30 to 35 knots across the Beaufort Seacoast. Northeasterlies from Point Barrow southward toward Point Hope and Cape Lisburn at 20 to 25, and more of a northerly flow outside of Kotzebue Sound. For Friday, winds diminish in the Beaufort Seacoast region, 25 knots there, 20 to 25 for the Chukchi Seacoast, and northerlies inside of Kotzebue Sound at 25 knots. Let's recap your surface weather conditions then as we go ahead with tonight. Look for low pressure south of Kodiak Island at 983 millibars. One front is dying out tonight. That will keep the winds a little bit stronger in the northern coast and maybe just outside of southeast. Look for some pockets of rainfall there and snow showers, and more of the same of what you've already experienced. Stronger winds up across the north slope there, especially along coastal areas. Areas of fog and blowing snow are certainly possible. And again, for aviators, that could increase the icing potential for you. Across the central and eastern chain, pockets of rain and snow there, most of that not reaching the interior or most of the western coast. As we get into Thursday, another weather system is setting up south of Haida Gwaii. This will race northward as we head into Friday. The remnants of the first one still sloshing up against the north and western coast. Most of the moisture not meeting into the interior there, but watch for a few pockets of rogue snow showers, and a 982 millibar low centers up on Friday in the Gulf with another system just south of the Alaska Peninsula. That's your Alaska weather. We will see you tomorrow and again on Friday.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Sometimes the best way to find a living is to stay right where you are and study with UAS online. Career-specific distance programs from the University of Alaska Southeast are the fastest way to increase your earning power.
We connect all over the world.